There's so much going on in defense tech, so much happening in the world, like in the battlefield.
Ukraine's shock sleeper drone blitz on Russia's bomber fleet has delivered a hammer blow to Vladimir
warning that
Putin's
Putin's attack on Ukraine is not over, racing for what will come next.
Everyone's watching.
There are some things about this war that are different than the way the United States Joint Force fights.
General James Rainey is the commanding general of Army Futures Command, leading the U.S. Army's efforts to prepare for the future of warfare. At the forefront of modern military transformation, he's focused on adapting to emerging threats like drones, AI-powered battlefields, and rapidly evolving technologies. From restructuring force design to integrating advanced systems, General Rainey is shaping how the Army fights and wins in the decades ahead.
The people that hate the United States, hate our way of life, are going to do everything they can with AI to weaponize it, use it for evil. So
People would say like, oh, maneuver warfare is in jeopardy because of these drones.
attacking the fiber optic supply chain would be something that would be well within the capabilities of the U.S. Joint Force.
Can we just like not kill ourselves before we get to there? Jim, thanks for coming.
Well, thanks for having me.
It was amazing spending some time with your family, having some dinner a couple weeks ago too. Amazing meal.
Yeah, that's my superpower, my wife and my dog Sherman.
Oh my God, Sherman is a big boy. He really is giant. Like
Yep.
he was kept away at dinner, but then we got to bring him out after dinner, which
Yeah.
was great.
Yeah. Yep. Great general.
Well,
Named after the general, not the tank.
oh, okay. Was
It's
the tank
important
good?
distinction. It had its day. It was good, but I'm an infantryman by trade, so I'm more a General Sherman's my favorite.
Yeah, that makes sense. So obviously you don't really need an introduction. People that watch this podcast they can also just Google you. So we don't need to go into too much of the backstory. I'd love to today. Like, there's so much going on in defense tech, so much happening in the world, like in the battlefield, like Ukraine and the Ukrainian conflict, like everyone's watching. So I'd love to just like a lot of today is just really getting a chance to like get your thoughts on some of this and like where it's headed in the future and stuff. So, obviously that's what just most recently, the Operation Spiderweb, I haven't got a chance to catch up with you since it happened. Like what's the chatter around the circles of the top brass,
Well, it's an incredibly impressive operation. What we've been able to understand about it so far. It is a striking reminder of the power of technology and creative thinking. That was my main takeaway. I mean, it's incredibly successful covert operation. Surprise is very hard to achieve on a battlefield that's as sensor soaked as it is, but so brilliant. Looks like a brilliant operation, devastating effect. But to me, it's reminiscent of times in my career where we saw something for the first time. And
Yeah.
you've heard me talk. A lot of people have talked about, the future is not so much about figuring it out. It's very hard to predict the future. You got to try. You got to pay attention to trends. It's more about not getting it wrong, not being really wrong, than it is about being right, I think. And because of that, I think one of the key characteristics of any future fight between anybody is going to be the ability to adapt.
Yeah.
So these aren't things that somebody's going to figure out the application and then be good for years or a decade. It's going to be a constant battle of adaptation. How do you build it? Not just adaptive soldiers and leaders, but adaptive formations, adaptive organizations, institutions, processes.
Okay. What could the Russians have done to stop that attack?
That's probably a question to be better answered by somebody that's over there paying closer attention.
Yeah.
I know that constant throughout warfare is the requirement to execute security, right? So, good aggressive security and reconnaissance. If you're in a static position, whether you're a unit or in the defense or a key facility, or even really when you're in the offense, one of the fundamental things is to avoid being surprised, and there's techniques for that. So Again, not to take anything away from the creativity. You know, when somebody does something and your main reaction is, "Wow, I didn't think of that." You know, that's pretty hard to defend against. But avoiding being surprised by the enemy. If you read the history of war, that's kind of a hallmark characteristic. It's something that's drilled into us from our first days in the Army.
Yeah, I think these like small drones are kind of changing the battlefield a lot. Have you seen? I guess you've seen like the little like fiber optic ones with the spool.
Yep.
Where are they getting all this fiber optic cable from? Like, I don't have no idea. Like, what are they doing?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's so crazy. Yeah. So those like people. That's kind of like an old. People say that's like what's old or is new again. Like there was like the tow missiles or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So like this
wire guided.
So like they're just bringing this stuff back.
Yep. The Dragon
Yeah.
missile.
Yeah. Like what is the Army's? I guess you guys are also preparing for counter drone stuff. So like, what is the Army's thoughts on that type of weapon?
You asked about Ukraine and Russia, and it's horrific. You know, any war. You know, Gaza, Israel. Anytime people are fighting, the human suffering, and it's just tragic. But in addition to that, if there is a war, I think any serious military professional has a responsibility to study it and learn everything there is to learn. And I'm very proud of the U.S. Army and the amount of energy and effort we're placing on making sure we study and try and turn things we are observing into lessons learned. So there are incredibly disruptive and alarming things happening in the Ukraine-Russia conflict, FPVs, the order of magnitude, just the scale of disruption, the amount of UAVs, the way they're being built and manufactured, the way the Ukrainians especially are mobilized in their civilian tech sector and doing manufacturing. So those are all things we should be learning from. One of the things that I also point out is there are some things about this war that are different than the way the United States Joint Force fights. So what you're not seeing in the Ukraine-Russia conflict is any maneuver, right? For a lot of reasons. You're not seeing a real meaningful air component. So I say that to say the best way to defeat this problem is to attack it.
Yeah.
Right? And the United States Joint Force, when we bring all our capabilities to bear, the ability to attack the supply line in depth. You asked about fiber optics. Attacking the fiber optic supply chain would be something that would be well within the capabilities of the U.S. Joint Force. Ground control stations are a point of vulnerability in the drone contest, and either side is very good at picking up. Or neither side has the full suite of capabilities to identify ground control stations and strike them at will, in accordance with the law of armed conflict, which makes it harder. But since we're values-based military, we absolutely are committed to abiding by that. But it's still possible. So then, okay, after so offense is always the best cure, and that's kind of our competency. We're a maneuver-based force, not a trench line attrition-based force. But we obviously got to make dramatic improvements in what we call formation-based layered protection. So we got to bring all the tools together to protect our formations from what is clearly a significant threat, especially the next time. That's why our chief and secretary just rolled out the Army Transformation Initiative, which is the most significant transformational endeavor in 50 years in the Army. It's because there's a clear realization that we got to get a lot better at things a lot faster. Yeah.
So basically what you're saying is, well, one, to summarize this for the listeners that aren't as in tune with the military, because my mom listens to this and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like, one, we fight a little differently, right? And so some of their tactics won't work the same. Some of their weapons won't be as effective. And then two, Army's looking at like, different defensive measures against the small drones, maybe to help maneuver. So like because people would say like, oh, maneuver warfare is in jeopardy because of these drones.
Mm.
And so, yeah.
I'm not there yet.
You're not there yet.
And I want to be real careful. I absolutely do not want to appear, and am certainly not dismissive of the sense of urgency, the level of disruption, the dramatic increase in the lethality and complexity of the battlefield that what we're witnessing over the last couple of years. I mean, it is absolutely alarming. It's something we need to fix with great urgency, certainly before we go to war again. I'm just saying that the United States Joint Force with a full suite of capabilities will have some advantages that you're not witnessing right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, exactly. And I'm sure some of it's, above my pay grade and security clearance. I used to have a top secret clearance, but not anymore, obviously.
Yeah. So, I think the characteristics I talk to people the most about is being intellectually humble and being passionately curious. Those are the two skill sets I'm looking for in my direct reports, my leadership inside Army Futures Command, because nobody's figuring this out. Nobody should be, and everybody should be taking this as a crisis with the maximum sense of urgency they can.
Why don't we see more? And maybe I'm just missing the news on it, but from our perspective, like see more like microwaves on the battlefield and the Ukrainian front lines on both sides, like more hype. I haven't seen that as like a defensive mechanism against the fiber drones. Why don't we see more of that?
We have capabilities in development. High-powered microwave is part of the solution. It's very complicated. There are companies that can do some things with it. It's expensive. The systems that do it right now are bigger. So the miniaturization that the U.S. tech companies are so good at, you see something one time, it's this big. The next time you see it, it's this big.
Yeah.
So we're looking forward to some of that.
Makes sense.
Same thing with lasers. Laser technology is absolutely going to be game changing. It's expensive. It's power intensive. The burn times are too high.
Yeah.
But that stuff is, they're great U.S. companies that I'm aware of and that we're working with that are making, huge improvements on that.
No, we're always here promoting the U.S. tech companies in the pod. Pull up I like the laser I like is that a blue halo one, that Locust. I like that thing. I think it looks cool. I like this. Have you ever seen this one? You ever seen it? No? Okay. Yeah, this is a good one. I like this. These still are, these products are getting better though. Like you see it, all these companies, there's many companies doing this too. It's not just the only one, but go up to the top. Oh yeah, that thing right there. That's nice. Yeah, I like that. They're getting there. They're tough to the slew rates on these things are a little like slow. I think still to get these like fast maneuvering like small drones, but I think the industry's aware of it and working on it. So it's a controls problem.
I saw your golf practice setup out there, which was very impressive. But yeah, if you're fighting, think of it as your for our non-military people, if you're going to go out and play golf, so you're going to go fight, you want a golf bag full of weapons, right? You want different tools for different situations.
That is true.
That's how the U.S. military, we fight. There's no one tool, there's no one solution to the UAV problem. So, the thing, the thing that is encouraging to me is I spend a lot of time looking at the nexus of technology and national security, if you will, that all the pieces are there.
Yep.
What's a little bit frustrating for me, for us is, a bunch of great companies with a capability is way less helpful than if those companies were to self-organize in a way where they could bring the sum of those tools together. What I'm saying?
That's a good segue.
Kind of like what we were able to do, the Army was able to do with Next Gen Command and Control. It's self-organizing. It's not the big prime. It's not one company winning a Game of Thrones competition and locking in a 10-year program of record. It's the best companies realizing the opportunity of them coming together to solve problems. I think that's the future of the U.S. defense industry, and I'm real excited about that.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about that often, and I think that is the future. I agree with you. But speaking of self-organizing and changing organizational structure, what's going on with the Army right now? See a lot of news about things changing.
Yeah. Well, so I mentioned it earlier. So the Army Transformation Initiative is General George, our Chief of Staff, and Secretary Driscoll, our Chief, looked at the sum of the problems we are facing and went through all of our material solutions and looked at all of our organizations and have charted a new path for us to transform. Like I said, probably the biggest in 50 years. The Army went through a major reorganization in the 70s. New doctrine, new systems, new schools, new organizations. So that's kind of the significance of where we're at right now. So the material part of that is we have a bunch of programs and things that we either have enough of or are not as relevant on the future battlefield that we want to stop buying or reduce the buys of, Humvees, for example. And so that living on the budget we have, right? Taxpayers give the Army a lot of money, so we want to take that money, stop buying things that aren't going to be relevant on the future battlefield, so that we can invest heavily in a data-centric network, in UAS, counter-UAS, electronic warfare, unmanned systems in general. So that's the biggest part of it. Subsequent to that, we're going through with things like all the advances in business systems and how much better technology is to help you run things, automate processes, bring AI to bear. We're going through a very significant reduction in our higher level headquarters so that we can maximize the number of men and women that are in our fighting formations, which is where we need them.
That makes sense.
So because of that, one of the decisions was to take my organization, Army Futures Command, and General Brito's Training and Doctrine Command, and combine those into a much larger, much more complex, but with one 4-star general commanding those.
And that's going to be in Austin?
The 4-star headquarters will be in Austin, but just like AFC now is in 129 different locations. TRADOC's one of the biggest organizations in the Army. So it's the 4-star headquarters will be in
Austin, but still, obviously distributed around.
I've obviously, a fan of Austin, Texas. That's where I'm at.
I mean, that's where we're at. So, I like it.
It's really, it's going to be complicated anytime you do those kind of things, but we've got the right leadership, and you're basically taking an organization with the proudest history. No organization in the Army is more responsible for the Army coming out of Vietnam and being the most dominant land force in the world. Desert Storm, OIF-1, that's Training and Doctrine Command, the professional NCO Corps we have, our leaders. So you take that proud history, then you take Army Futures Command, which is an 8-year-old organization, very small, outward-facing tech, Department of the Army, civilian, scientists, STEM, heavy. You take the best of both of those, you get a more effective, leaner organization. Get everything in the everything we're doing in transformation will now be under one commander, which is always the best way to do things.
So I imagine it's pretty busy right now because the Army is going through some structural management layer changes at the same time, also trying to rapidly bring new capabilities to the warfighter.
Yeah.
So you're doing both at the same time right now. Yeah. Is it hectic for the team? What's
we're not sitting around looking for stuff to do. But the Army's, we're always busy. There's never, I've only been in 38 years, but I don't recall any period of my time where I didn't think I was busy. It's the sense of urgency. The key is to focus on the thing, and the thing is lethality. So, getting soldiers and units ready to go to war and dominate, really getting them ready so that we continue to deter our enemies. But if we have to fight, that's the one non-negotiable thing, right? But, and I don't know, I know you got a broad listener audience. The United States Army, every service has its role to play, and I'm very, I wouldn't go to war without all of my teammates on the Joint Force by any means. The Army we do whatever the country needs us to do. You know, we're the general purpose force. If somebody drives a barge into a bridge in Maryland, they call the Army.
Yeah.
You know, move to the border, Army. Forest fires, Army. Middle East, Korea. We're all over the Pacific under the great leadership, Admiral Paparo out there. Ron Clark's our commander. Yeah. So there's a 4-star Army command in the Pacific. They're, you know, if you looked at where they are on any given day, and I could go on and on.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So,
yeah, I mean, the Pacific. Let's talk about it. 'Cause obviously, China in the backdrop is like our peer on the world stage now, economically speaking. They're obviously, everyone knows this, and like, so, you know, we look at China a lot as an adversary. We look at the Pacific, you know, and the Army. Most people think of the Army as being like on the ground, but yeah, what you're saying is like, no, you guys probably own more boats than the Navy or something, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know about that, but they own more warships than we do, for sure. We actually have a large watercraft, but yeah,
the Pacific's a big ocean,
right?
You know?
So, you know, China is what we say they are. I mean, they are, you know, the number one aspirant for replacing us, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know what they're going to do. I don't think anybody does. We pay attention to it. I always tell people, start with what she says he's going to do. Yeah. You know, so he's made it clear.
And he can read his speeches and stuff.
Right. Yeah. So, and deterring that war, reassuring our allies up there. I mean, that's why the military exists. The Army's role in the Pacific, there's no such thing as a air and maritime theater, you know, any more than there's a land theater. I mean, we fight as a joint force. There's joint forces. There's joint theaters. In the Pacific, I think the Army would play more of an enabling role, critical role, but all the air and missile defense, protecting not just long-range Army fires, but our Air Force and Navy teammates. We're responsible under Title X for the sustainment of the joint force, so we'd play a large logistics role, not just watercraft, but moving fuel, ammo. Command and control is a competency of the United States Army. We're very good at forming joint task forces under 2- and 3-star Army leadership. We have very good communication capability. So, and then we have a lot of really useful capabilities. We have the ability to attack space, cyber, into the ocean, devastating in the land. And I think there'll be, you know, if it protracts and if it escalates, I mean, there'll clearly be a time where we're going to decide that we need to take land away from somebody and hold that land, and that is what the United States Army does.
That makes sense. Like, so speaking of like switching back to tech a little bit, then obviously in the Pacific, you know, people are talking. A lot of the industry is building. There's a lot of companies like maybe like Havoc or Saronic building these USVs. Is the Army like the primary customer, or the Navy for like these USV boats, like the little boats that blow up?
Unmanned systems and autonomy is coming. I mean, like what we're witnessing in the air-ground littoral, the first couple thousand feet off the ground, that's coming to the ground. I mean, fast. The Ukrainians is good.
I mean, the ground vehicles.
Right. And you've witnessed isolated applications of autonomous watercraft, primarily in a strike
setting,
devastating strike role. And there's subterranean or subsurface and the subterranean tunnel systems that are in every big city. So it's not just, it's everything, air, ground, maritime. I think I think that's a fascinating application. I think there's some great companies that are doing that. I mentioned watercraft. Do you think about sustainment and moving, 40-foot containers and tanks and, massive amounts of ammunition? I think there's a huge opportunity for autonomous watercraft in that space. I went down and visited the offshore oil, some companies that are doing the offshore oil industry down in the great southern coast of Texas there. And And, it's fundamentally the same thing. They move stuff from land out into the ocean. We move stuff from ocean onto land. And I was struck by the absence of human interaction in that space. So I think the sky's the limit for any kind of autonomous watercraft in multiple applications.
This could be big for logistics, and Army's obviously very good at logistics. So this could be, that makes a ton of sense.
Got to get bigger. I mean, they got to get bigger. They got to, the amount of weight that starts to get interesting, you're talking 100 tons on a watercraft, not 500 pounds, which is interesting also.
They do need to get bigger. I don't know if you saw, like, some of them are they've made some press releases about having bigger ones soon.
Yeah. Well, I know you like history. I mean, read about the Higgins boats. The Normandy invasion was basically enabled, by incredible bravery on the part of the soldiers. I mean, that's the real story. But if you look at the technical aspects of that, they basically built those ships to do that mission. So that's a small company in the U.S. that met a need. Yeah, that makes sense. Jack, pull up the. I wanted to talk about the pull up like the Palmer Luckey technomancer thing with the IVAS. You seen that? Do you guys do IVAS? IVAS is Army, right? Yep. Yes.
Oh yeah. So have you? I don't know if you've seen him. He talks about this a lot. He wants to turn warfighters into technomancers. Do you know what do you know what a technomancer is? I can tell you if you. I am
not familiar with.
This is one of his things he likes to say a lot.
I've not heard that. I have. I mean, I'm incredibly impressed. I mean, I know the history of him personally.
Oh, yeah,
his
amazing.
company. And
amazing. I mean, he's one of the top 10 entrepreneurs of all time.
Something to pay attention to.
Yeah. Technomancer is it's a sci-fi battle mage, if you wanted to know. So like in Lord of the Rings, a wizard. So in a sci-fi, if you wanted a wizard in sci-fi world, it'd be a technomancer. So he wants to turn warfighters into wizards, basically. So like, slow down. So like this. It's like, I guess you guys talk about this a lot. Tell us what the IVAS program is and what it's going to be.
Yeah. So IVAS started out as a heads-up display to bring technology. And when we started it, our original thought was that down at the rifle squad, so 9 soldiers, that we would bring all the available information in a consumable way into a heads-up display. And it had fits and starts. I mean, the technology is it's worth going after because it's a 10x, 100x increase in lethality and capability. But we struggle with form, fit, function, the weight of it, anything you put down. And the good thing about infantry squads, the rifle squad is the Army's most lethal weapon system, regardless of technology, because they work. It works in bad weather. You can move it across a river. You don't need to feed it for a couple days. You give it a little water. They don't take batteries. All the tech limiters don't apply to a rifle squad. So when you put that much technology in it, it started causing us some problems with, simple things like humidity and rainfall, the battery supply, the weight. So we're still evolving it. What's more promising now is that in on the civilian side, better than I do, the pace that this kind of technology is developing is like unbelievable. So with next gen command and control, which is our new data centric overall approach to command and control, one of the chief of staff's main things was it needed to be end user device agnostic. So get out of big radios and server stacks and get onto iPads, TAC devices, phones. And we think that technology like this, IVAS, will manifest itself in a commander leader tool.
Like a heads up display.
Right. Exactly. Coupled with a data centric network.
Yeah. It's kind of like Halo. You ever play Halo, the game?
No, I should have kind of like as I took this job, I probably should have taken up gaming. I'm a 60-year-ld, so when
I'll game with you. I'll come over to your house.
You probably
play some video games.
Probably kick my ass since I've never done it. But I have a Nintendo like WWE, but it's got like Hulk Hogan on it, so it's a little dated. But we played outside mostly when I was growing up.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I
But
did.
I
did
don't know
too.
much
well,
about
you can't
James.
tell from like how I look, but I played outside too.
Yeah.
I can throw a football.
I'm better at
an athlete.
I'm better at movies. Maybe movies and books. So.
Yeah, no movie. Okay, first of all, I've had a couple of other Army people on the show, and Army people I've learned are great at movies.
Yeah.
And they were telling me on deployment, it's because like a lot of times you're down, a lot of downtime on deployment because like you're only in battle so much.
Some guys, yeah.
Yeah, some guys,
Yeah.
and then they're resting between like really intense conflict, and they're like watching movies, really brushing up on their pop culture, so they can go pretty deep. And that was fun going deep with them on that.
Yeah. I certainly have watched my share of movies in my life.
The ability to, I feel like it's really fun having those guys on.
It's funny that let me connect those two things.
Yeah.
I have two wonderful son-in-laws. My daughters are wonderful grown Army kids. Both made really good choices, but both of my son-in-laws grew up and are big gamers. And what I have found is because they did that, they have a serious gap in their movie watching development, so to say. So now when I get together with my son-in-laws, I make them watch the classics with me. So
it's fun to show someone like a really great movie that they haven't seen.
Yeah.
Because like there's so many, they don't make as many great movies now. The mediums, it's a very difficult medium. Like I think you have 2 hours and you have to like tell a pretty gripping story. And like a lot of people now are like their attention spans are like they've gone away. Like social media has like kind of changed people.
Yeah.
Like the dopamine receptors are like in a longer movie, you're not hitting it.
Yeah. The Netflix, nobody would watch a 10-hour movie, but we'll all sit down and watch 10 1-hour episodes of a show in 24 hours.
And they'll make each episode have like a really like a cliffhanger or like a dopamine hit, and that keeps you. That's how they do it. Yeah.
Yep. So there's no shortage of classics.
I've been rewatching. These aren't classics, by the way, but I've been rewatching all the Mission Impossibles.
Yeah.
1 through, I think there's like 10 now. There's 1 in theaters. So I wanted to watch them all before I went to the theater to see this last one.
Not real familiar with those.
It's not a classic. That's
Tell you a good one if you like the sci-fi stuff.
Let's do what do you got?
Starship Troopers.
Oh, amazing.
Yep.
Amazing
Classic.
book. Amazing movie.
Yeah. The book's better than the movie.
Yeah, the book is better, but the movie
almost always a constant.
Yeah, but the movie did a really, really nice job. I need to go back and rewatch that. Also, I mean, those aliens were crazy. What was the whole thing? It was like the Queen, you had to go in the tunnel.
Something like that.
Yeah.
It was really about the service.
It was,
and
of course.
earning your citizenship, that kind of thing that I enjoyed. The rereading Ender's Game right now.
Oh, yeah. Another great book.
Yep.
That's really good.
I read a lot of tech stuff, the good thing about, like, by the time somebody wrote a book about AI, it would almost be, I'm sure there's some great ones, but I find, paying attention to great articles. I'm on several distro lists, and we all pass, when we come across a great article. Some of my colleagues and relationships that I've built in the industry side, and especially in the university systems, I always ask them, like, hey, if you read something that you're like, wow, that's interesting, please send it to me, because I'm sure it'll be fascinating to me. So you got to stay current.
Yeah, that makes sense. Ender's Game, do you think that's like kind of prescient? It's like coming true a little? Not yet.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the simulation and war game, the reason I picked it back up,
they're doing the war gaming.
We're spending a lot of time on, bringing technology. We can't just bring technology to bear on the battlefield, which is obviously the most important thing. I think we're missing an opportunity to dramatically improve our simulation and the way we train. Our chief, General George, is wearing me out constantly about the amount of people it takes to do a simulated training event and to bring technology to bear to, not to get rid of those people, but to optimize the people we have in.
I mean, this could actually be a pretty good place to bring the headsets in, maybe like some virtual training. Like.
Actually, we're doing some work with one of the things we asked the company to do is to use a heads-up display to help us visualize the future fight, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, I bet that. Yeah,
because you can look at a flat map and you can see we're all trained to read terrain.
Yeah.
So even a flat map, good military map, an experienced person can visualize terrain pretty easily, and it's easy to show where your guys are. It's pretty easy to have some staff officer plot out where the enemy probably is. But what you can't visualize is things like the electromagnetic spectrum, or one of the things that struck me was the health of your network. So, we have say we're moving data, it's going through multiple repeaters. A couple years ago, all I would get is, "Hey, boss, it's working," or "It's not working," or "It's degraded." If you had a really good team, they could tell you it's green, amber, red. Yeah. Now with those goggles, I can literally see the health of my network, what links are jeopardized. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's amazing.
The potential.
Yeah, so I think that's cool. Anything else you're reading or read recently?
The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
I mean, yeah, obviously that was one of the first book I had ever read before I started becoming an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I was like 28. That was when I started my first business. I read that. That was the first book I read.
Yeah. It was
so
recommended to me.
Yeah. Ben Horowitz. Very, very smart guy.
Super impressive. My favorite book of all time is a book called Lonesome Dove. So
I haven't read that.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Oh my God.
Right.
Okay.
I can't talk to you again until you read it.
I will read it.
So,
write that down, Jack, for me.
It's a Western novel.
But,
okay.
But,
yeah, I have to.
But anyway, so
I will read it.
I pleasure read. I allow myself the luxury of pleasure reading every summer, so I pull books back.
I like
up.
that you read fiction.
Yeah.
I think fiction is really important.
But biographies are my number one, and then I do believe in reading some fiction.
It's for creativity. It's so important. I feel like not enough people read it anymore.
Yeah. Edmund Morris wrote a 3-part series on Theodore Roosevelt. Great men. I'm fascinated by people that were really good at a whole bunch of things, and leading through challenging, complex times.
Yeah.
So you either live your life or take advantage of learning from the people that have lived other lives and longer lives. And but yeah, you got to be well rounded. I think, I don't know where I got it, probably from my mom, but valuing reading and reading or consuming information.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's younger people, like somebody said, like, "Oh, quit watching a YouTube video and you should read a book." I don't think that's the point. I think the point is to value learning, be a lifelong learner, be passionately curious, be intellectually humble. Those are skills.
Those are the skills. It's not the medium exactly. Yeah. Yeah. The tools.
Although if I listen to an audio, maybe this is an older person thing too, but if I listen to an audiobook, which I love doing, if it's really good, I will still go out and buy the book and then reread it so I can dog-ear pages and write in the margins and take notes to myself and highlight it. You can't go back and pick up a great, like, I remember reading that book, and then so I like to physically own books.
Yeah. No, I was saying that I think the tools out to be a lifelong learner now, it's crazy. Like, I have a 3-year-old, and like I'm just thinking about her growing up now. Like, I've started to use ChatGPT a lot. I don't know if you guys use this a ton, but it's crazy. Like, it doesn't even need to get that much better, I don't think. Like, maybe if it's hitting a plateau, who knows? But like, it's amazing already as a tool, like, just for like chatting with it. Like, and I've been watching a lot of young people like use it just like as like a therapist coach. Yeah. Like, it's wild. Like, I don't know what's going on. I mean, it's going to be a whole new world growing up, I think.
We're getting a little bit off the technology thing, but in the national security interest, public school education is that is essential to our national security.
100%.
I think the potential for AI, large language models, to dramatically improve the public school experience. I have a daughter who teaches public school. I have a 3-year-old grandson. I'm with you. I'm more optimistic than pessimistic.
I'm so optimistic.
But it's going to be, it's going to eliminate the excuses for people to not learn.
I also think like it is like a buddy or a coach. Like, even like bullying, like kids like who get bullied, like, go talk to chat and they'll explain like, oh, like all the reasoning behind it and like help them feel better about it. I'm like even convinced it'll help with stuff like that. Like, I think it'll be very multi-use.
I'd still sign her up for jiu-jitsu.
Oh, of course,
something,
yeah.
Karate. Have some physical skills and some coping skills. I think it's probably the best of both.
Yeah, no, I got physically tough, you know. I'm not that good of a fighter, but I'll get her some lessons or something. But yeah, no, I'm very optimistic about that. Like, that's one of the things I was like, the way I view the world right now is like, there's so much innovation happening. Forget defense for a moment, just like in the world. Obviously, there's like rising debts and stuff with nations, but like there's so much growth, I think, about to happen because of this new technology. And it's like, can we just like not kill ourselves before we get to there? You know, is basically how I kind of view it, because there's like a lot of conflict going on and stuff. But I think like all this technology will, over a 20-year period, make the world very like net richer and like more productive and successful and like better quality of life for everyone. But I think that there's like a transient that we're in right now. What's part of why I do what I do, like at my company, is like, you know, in this transient, I see a good amount of danger. But I do think like overall, like mostly just very perma bull. Like I mostly like don't see like hot wars between nuclear powers and stuff. Like I'm mostly like, optimistic.
Deterring our enemies and preserving, you know, defending the Constitution, defending the country. That's you know, that's what the military does.
Yeah.
That's what the Army does. And you got to be an optimist to be in this business. You know, like there's nobody follows pessimists around anywhere on the battlefild, right?
Yeah,
you know,
no
like
way.
when the ramps came down in Normandy, you know, I mean, that was some optimistic fellas
Oh my God.
leading that. So, yeah, you got to be an optimist. I think, you know, it's uncontrollable, you know, so bad people, and maybe I'm cynical, I don't know from my life experience, but bad people are going to do bad
Of course.
things. The people that hate the United States and hate
Of
our way of
course.
life are going to do everything they can with AI to weaponize it, use it for evil. So that means that our people need to be better at finding good applications of it. You know, synthetic biology and AI is frightening, you know, the potential. Or encryption versus decryption. You know what I mean? Like that's going to be a contest fought in the AI space. So our people that are building vaccines, building preventative things, need to be better at people that are making bad things.
Sometimes it sucks though, because defense is harder. You know.
Well, it is, but defense is stronger than offense. It is not decisive. You can't win anything by defending. You know what I mean? You got to be able to take things from the enemy, which is why we have the army we have. But it appears to me, again, you know, my studies of it, it appears that technology dramatically favors the defense in that it is so much easier to integrate technology when you're not moving.
Yeah.
Right. So take your earlier comments about you know, as hard as it is to protect something, an airfield from drones. If you're talking about an armored brigade combat team or a light infantry battalion that is moving, it's you know, I mean, it's orders of magnitude more complicated. You know, because you can't just build your defense, set in your radars, hardwire. You know, you can't run fiber optic. You can't have big giant generators. You can't operate off the grid. You got to have all that capability in an attack. So the offense is decisive. Defense is always inherently stronger, and it looks like technology is favoring the defense because it's so much easier to integrate things.
One thing about defense I keep hearing in our industry is and I have these drones here, but is on the deterrence and defense is like we need to increase our production, like reindustrialize back home and stuff. Like obviously in China, in Shenzhen, in the world's factory, they make like one drone a second. You know, basically they print these things, make like 80% of the drones, but it's not about, I mean, these are just toys, obviously, but the production that they've built up, the capability. And like now we're trying to do that. How's the Army helping industry on that?
Well, the defense industrial base, the American industrial base, needs across all sectors. You know, everything from white phosphorus, gunpowder, conventional artillery shells, all the way up to hypersonic missiles. So there's a lot of interest in that. Our chief and secretary just did their posture over with Congress and had some great conversations with some senators that are and members of the House that are committed to helping the military and helping the Army. I think you'll see some increased funding there.
Nice.
There's no shortage of facilities. military owned that have these incredible workforces of great civilians. So in some cases, there's some re-education, retooling, physically retooling the factories, and it's not really, I don't like the term upskilling. It's really new skilling, because these are phenomenally skilled people that just need to learn different things. So, if you go back and look at 1938, when the president mobilized the industrial base in preparation for World War II, it's going to take something like that. And some people say, well, we were a manufacturing-based economy then, and we had, coming out of the depression. Yeah, there was some uniqueness to that, but it's not anything that the United States of America, if we come together, could not.
So,
out.
Take me back to that. I don't know that. So, 1938, started getting us ready for World War II.
Yeah, early in the 30s,
but just saying, let's reindustrialize. Let's get built up for this.
Yep.
And during that time, there was conflict going on in Europe.
Oh
yeah. So it was just obvious.
Well, even before it started, so
it's similar to today.
Roosevelt, there was a pretty clear understanding that the world was getting ready to come off the rails, and the U.S. Whether it wasn't as much planning on doing it as being prepared if we got involved, reached out and went to the titans of industry. There's a great book called Freedom's Forge that tells this story. But went out to great. That's why I like the term American industrial base. Better than defense industrial base. These were American companies. Ford, GM, Goodyear, General Electric.
That makes
I
sense.
could go on and on. And they did really creative things. They gave them educational contracts. So they said, hey, we don't want you to redo your whole factory because we don't know how much we're going to buy, but here's some money. Make 100,000 rifles for us and tell us what you learn. I mean, the going on to a war footing. Not to make it sound easy, the bigger challenge with UAVs. So I'll give you a good example. 155 artillery rounds. We had a store of them that was sufficient for our war plans. We gave a lot of them to Ukraine. We're jacking up manufacturing to compensate for that. And it was very challenging. But you can take a 155 artillery shell and put it in a bunker and store it for 20 years.
Yeah.
You got to do some maintenance. You got to check them, right? But I wouldn't buy a UAV today for a year from now,
because they're going to change so much,
right? So it's much more complicated. So not only do we need to be able to manufacture, but we got to be able to manufacture at X rate, leverage dual use, the commercial uses of UAVs, and then have the capacity to dramatically scale.
How do you think of it? Because you're not going to stockpile these.
No.
So how do you
there's
keep
parts.
the industry?
There's parts you can stockpile.
Maybe like the brushless motors or something.
Yeah. And it would be great if a whole bunch of U.S. companies made brushless motors in the United States. That would be that would be real helpful.
Yeah. I've seen some companies raising money on that.
Yeah. And again, I don't want to sound dismissive. It is, we have to dramatically increase our production utilization. Our chief set a goal of putting 1,000 UAVs in every one of our 18 divisions in the next year.
Wait, he wants to stockpile then, basically?
Not stockpile, have that many so we can train with them and figure out how to use them. We have a multi-echelon approach. We want to buy several different categories of UAVs and types, but we want to buy X amount. But then the next problem, once we figure out the tech, getting technology into the Army really fast, which is about the money thing I was talking to you about, the chief and the secretary have asked Congress to give us more flexibility with the money we do have so we can move it around from program to program. That'll help us start buying the technology that exists. For the most case, you mentioned high power microwave, hypersonics, lasers. There's some things that are still developing. But in almost every case, we don't have to go out and build a new helicopter, build a new tank. Although we're doing that. But in the case of things like drones and robots and software, it all exists. So it's really of getting the fiscal agility to go out to the great U.S. tech companies that exist and start buying stuff, get it in the hands of our warfighters so they can use it during training and on deployments and close that feedback loop to almost nothing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I've heard the high power microwave is called. I've heard them called like a force field. like a magical force field.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that.
Yeah, I don't know if exactly right, but I think it can probably cook one of these. But I think some of these, like have you ever seen the Anduril Bolt or like there's a couple drones that are much more militarized now. Like they have conductive layers. Like I don't know if the microwave is part of maybe a layered defense or something though.
Yeah, I think there's no one tool, but I think all the tools exist. I mean,
yeah, and it depends on the conflict, depends on the situation.
Yeah, it starts with a data layer. You got to have a command and control system that's data centric. You got to have a data mesh, data layer. Because if you can't do that, you can't bring AI to bear.
Yeah.
And if you can't bring AI to bear, you're never going to be fast enough. So that exists. We prototyped that in the Army. We're starting fielding of it to our 1st Division next year. It's going to revolutionize warfare. Then you need multimodal radars. Either some combination of radars that will accurately sense.
Yeah.
Right. Radars meaning all things: electromagnetic, traditional radar, acoustic is working really well with some UAVs. If you're outside the cities, for example, acoustic sensing is going unbelievable pace, especially when people are bringing AI to bear. And then you have to have a suite of effectors, we call them weapon systems. You got to have, a close-in capability that's like a flak gun that's shooting 30 millimeter projectiles, shotguns. You got to have things that can strike at the maximum, and if the enemy's coming with a swarm of them, you need to be engaging them far enough out where you can defeat them all before they get to you, right? So you can't just have a final protective fire. You got to have the ability to reach out and touch them. High power microwave, lasers, kinetic
guns,
effectors,
all of it. Electronic
jamming is very good.
Have you seen the prequels of Star Wars, like the episode 1, 2, 3? You ever watch those?
No.
Hold on. I want to show you the Gungan force field. Pull that up, Jack. Why he's pulling that up though? Like this so like what they do here, and I don't know if I want to ask about additive manufacturing because I know a lot of our listeners like to talk about additive manufacturing.
Yeah.
If you look at this though, this is like injection molded. So there's like this top piece, and there's this bottom piece, and then there's a conveyor belt, and they basically stamp them together, and it's like very quick manufacturing.
Yep.
Like very automated factory. Versus like a lot of people talk about like 3D printing these. What's the Army's like take on like that version of building it versus just like making a factory that makes
we're experimenting and exploring and doing both.
No, that's the force field, by the way. Look how sweet that's what we need. What company's making this force field? That's what I feel like we need to get something like that.
Well, I don't know if I'd visualize it like some magical force field, but that's what I'm talking about when I talk about layered protection.
Oh yeah,
you should be able to create that effect.
I think we can create
by a combination. I'm absolutely confident we can.
Well, you talked about this.
It's harder when you're moving.
We talked about this at dinner. You were saying like we're confident in creating this effect from the air, but you mentioned that there's like a real good threat coming on the ground. Like we talked about that a little, like with the unmanned ground vehicles.
Yeah, no, I mean like what would be the point of putting an Army unit out there and throwing a bubble over it, right?
Yeah,
you're right. So we exist to maneuver.
Yeah,
we fundamentally take and hold ground from committed enemies, and I don't think the air only, that's a problem. It's a big problem right now because there's probably the biggest gap between what's happening on the battlefields of Ukraine and what we anticipate the next time we fight. So getting better at protecting ourselves and bringing offensive UAS capabilities to bear, to include electronic warfare, is the thing we're going after right now.
That makes sense.
But to what end, right? I mean, it's still so that you can maneuver.
Yeah.
That's why I caution people, and I'm open-minded, but I have no indications that we are going to replace our men and women, our soldiers, infantry platoons, armor companies. I mean, that's not going away. So it's not how do you bring technology to bear to replace
I agree.
men and women.
Yeah.
It's how do you optimize the two of them. So you bring, let's offload all the risk onto machines. I tell people, no blood for first contact, right? Like we shouldn't find IEDs or stumble into minefields with humans. We shouldn't ever enter a building. Urban fighting is the nastiest, most complex, horrific thing we do. And there's no reason with today's technology that the first thing going into a building should ever have a heart, should ever be a human being. I mean, that's our most treasured thing we have. Why would we do that with technology? So
the technomancers is right then, obviously.
I don't. Yeah, I'm gonna have to go watch that one. But back to your UAV thing.
So you need to.
So we need to mass produce cheap things like this.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, obviously, these are probably valuable for reconnaissance
or just something,
right? Flying them into radars, flying them into helicopters. But this thing isn't 3D printed, right? There's components of it are, and that's something that gets lost in the narrative. Those brushless motors you were talking about, like you can't 3D print that. You can 3D print the props, right? So additive manufacturing, cameras, right? The cameras, the motors, so it's more, to me, it's how do you bring all those capabilities to rapidly produce UAVs as far forward as possible so you don't have to move them. Right. But the other thing, Steve, is, the United States, we have a huge tech advantage, I believe, even over China. If you look at in the defense sector, if you look at the precision, the stuff we've made, like Patriot missiles, Tomahawk, I mean, like the stuff that U.S. technology has brought to bear is exquisite.
Yeah.
I mean, and
I agree.
So I don't believe that we should walk away from our superpower, our tech advantage, and just mass produce cheap things only. So
I'm with you.
The way I try and describe the problem is, if you had a scale, a continuum, if something is cheap and mass, because that's the real fascinating thing. What I'm watching about UAVs is, commanders forever in the U.S. have had both precision capabilities and mass. We could drop a whole bunch of bombs and 155 artillery on people, or we could fly an exquisite munition through the window of a building, through somebody's forehead, through a radar. It looks to me like UAVs are creating a merger of those two things, where now commanders can have mass with great precision, and that's going to be a huge marked advantage to the people that bring that to bear, and the U.S. will do it. But anyways, so buying cheap things that are mass makes sense to me. Buying expensive things, if they're exquisite, makes sense to me.
I agree.
What doesn't make sense to me is anything in between. So how do we get out of the 80% of stuff in the middle that is neither cheap mass nor exquisite technology, and use those precious taxpayer dollars to make sure we're doing one of the other two that make a lot of sense? So I think, cheap mass,
that makes sense.
I wouldn't want to only have that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we forget, obviously, like the Patriot missile, like our big, hypersonics that we're building, like these are really serious weapons.
6th-gen fighters, submarines.
Yeah. We need to make more submarines, though. That's hard. I mean, I was at Naval Reactors, and we used to, when I was there in 2008, when I was in the Navy.
I use that example for you.
Thank you.
I know.
You set me up. You're actually you should be a podcast host too. When I was there, I mean, we were making like 2 Virginia class a year. I think we're now less than that slightly, but like it's the shipyard stuff, man. I don't know if you spend much time on shipyards, but it's a tough place.
No, I have great teammates. I know that our Navy, they're laser focused on that. Obviously, we got the world's best Navy too. We talk a lot of smack on each other, but
thank you. Yeah,
we don't want to go to war without one or the other, right?
We do have the world's best Navy. The Navy was having a tough time at the Red Sea. I guess the conflict's over a little bit now. I don't know if it's still going on as much, but that was like they were just sending huge missiles at these cheap planes, basically blowing them up. I mean, they were hitting everything. The Navy was shooting it all down, but expensive.
General Carilla, their great commander out there in CENTCOM's one of my best friends. I'll tell him you should come on your show.
Oh, that would be amazing. Yeah.
I'll tell you that story.
I mean, I don't know. Obviously, I'm sure a lot of it's classified, but a lot going on over there. I don't know. Yeah, the conflict. We spent most of today talking about Ukraine and Russia and the drones and stuff, but there's in the Israel Iran conflict, I guess. They're not at war, but they're kind of they're just sending long range missiles like Shaheds. So it's different. It's I mean, they're doing the Shaheds in Russia, Ukraine too, but like they're in Iran, they're just like sometimes they'll lob over 100.
Yeah.
You know, and then Iron Dome hits it all, interceptors, they knock it out. Like, Iran knows they're going to get all those intercepted, right? But they just want to do it. Like, what's the whole thing? I don't get it.
I wouldn't want to try and predict their logic behind that. I mean, the Shahed it's a terror weapon.
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredibly inaccurate.
Yeah, it's just like a dumb.
And there are people in the world, not the United States, not our allies, but there are people in the world that think that lobbing high explosive rounds into urban areas is somehow justified.
It's terrible. Yeah.
I mentioned the law of armed conflict, Steve. I will tell you, the United States military is values based. All of us, we abide by the law of armed conflict, which in the near term makes it incredibly harder. Like when we talk about command and control, we say our systems can't be faster than China's. They got to be 10 times faster because we got to build in the time to apply that ethical decision making. So, and a lot of us, we have a lot of combat experience in the senior ranks of the Army, but those of us that have had that incredible responsibility to do that in combat, we take that very seriously. We do everything possible to avoid harming innocent civilians, for example, minimizing collateral damage. So some of the shooting inaccurate, high explosive things at innocent civilian or at civilian populations, that's just so out of keeping with our value system and the way we fight.
It just seems like if someone lobbed a bunch of Shaheds into the U.S., we would just like go to war with them.
That's way out of my lane.
I'm not saying
you're talking high level national security.
I mean, I have no idea. Yeah, it's not my thing. It's way out of my. By the way, as a podcast host, most things are out of my lane. I don't. It's just the thing.
But having the technology, bringing the technology that exists and developing the technology to be able to prevent that from happening in the United States is something that we're taking very seriously.
Well, yeah, I mean, they got the Golden Dome. Like we talk about that, like building that interceptor system in the. Yeah, like I think about that. That seems very hard. Like a part of the Golden Dome is to like make a boost phase interceptors to like intercept like intercontinental ballistic missiles.
Yeah.
Haven't we tried that before? Isn't that a really hard problem?
Oh, I'm sure it's incredibly talented.
It's like maybe a space laser or something at it, or something.
So's landing a spaceship, so's proliferating low Earth orbit. I mean, there are things that are happening.
But I believe I mean, we were saying earlier, like we're very optimistic about where technology is going. Like we can probably do it.
Yeah, I think the United States has. We have advantages. We have strengths. We should bring them all to bear. One of them is certainly technology, innovation, capitalism. With something like 48 of the top 50 software companies in the United States, over 50% of the supercomputers, data centers, and that's going to get contested in electricity and fresh water. And we have diplomatic power, we have information power, we have military power, we have economic power. I think we have technology power too, and bringing that to bear. So certainly, why would we not do everything we could to protect ourselves?
Well, before we wrap up here, obviously you've had a very long career.
Yeah.
You said 38 years?
38.
So like,
I'm thinking about making a career.
Yeah. What's next for you? Like tell everyone, all the listeners here are the industry you've been that you work with. So
I don't know. I mean, I haven't had much time to think about it. I'm way closer to the end of my career than the beginning of it. I think it's a privilege to serve. I've enjoyed every minute of it. I've never thought of it, never thought about getting out. So when I'm done with the Army, whenever that is, I'll move into soldier for life status. And,
all right.
And the one thing I'm certain of, and I would tell everybody, I'm certainly not as smart as most people, but I have lived a little longer. The older I get, the more I realize that doing something with your life that is meaningful and that is of service to our fellow citizens is the key to the key to living a good life,
Yeah.
a meaningful way. So I say that to say that whatever I do, I will seek out the opportunity to work with young people. That's one of the things I love about the Army, having some purpose behind what I do, and doing something that my wife and awesome kids and grandkids can say, I'm proud of him for doing that.
Amazing. And then the last thing, you see Penn State football is preseason number 1, probably?
I didn't know Penn State was still playing football.
Wait,
I thought you guys gave up after that. Just, total inability to
beat Notre
handle
Dame.
Ohio State.
Oh yeah. Well, I can never handle Ohio. But this year, I think we're preseason number 1.
Yeah,
I don't know if you
great.
saw the news.
Great.
So I'm sure we're going to hold that.
Good luck with that.
So wait, do you prefer Ohio State or tennis or the Longhorns, like overall?
Well,
Because you live down there, you know.
Yeah. So my favorite is Eastern Kentucky University because that's where me and my bride went. So but they don't play on Saturday on ESPN a whole lot. So my daughters went to Ohio State and Texas A&M. So those are kind of my two go-to teams. Since I didn't go there, but a lot of my money did to both of them. I feel like I'm not bandwagon jumping, and I'm from Ohio, and we live in Texas. But we have a great partnership with the University of Texas. So the Texas A&M hatred only applies to people that went to one of the two. I root for both of them.
All right, your staff's going to kill me if we don't stop. So this is
That's okay.
Jim, it's been an amazing time.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on, sir.
Well,
Appreciate it.
I hope it was interesting.
No, it was amazing.
Thanks
It was
for your
awesome.
time.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Yeah, thanks.